As the feds investigate the White House, both parties are sending warnings to the president.
Darrell, I'd be careful if I were you, Mr. President.
Meanwhile, Congress still won't reveal which members spend our money to make sexual harassment claims go away, and it's costing us a fortune.
There have been 268 claims paid. We know the total is $17 million.
We'll go one-on-one with Congresswoman Cathy Castor, who's trying to shut down the hush fund on Capitol Hill. We'll also continue to investigate the tax cut plan and our options with North Korea. Ignore it, blockade it, or go back to war. This is Money, Power, and Politics. We'll start with the mess in the Florida Senate, where Jack Latvala, the senator accused of sexually harassing 6 women, has launched an attack campaign against the one accuser who revealed her name by revealing text in which she called other senators vulgar names, who now says she needs protection due to threats of retaliation.
And I'm sorry if people think that that's unfair to the victim, but frankly, I don't think there is a victim in this case.
Well, he's wrong about that. There is a victim. It's either Latvala for being falsely accused, or it's his accuser for being smeared for speaking the truth. This is still under investigation, so there is some irony here in Latvala's justification for attacking his accuser. He's, in effect, doing the same thing that he's accusing his accusers of doing to him.
You know, the rush to judgment and the people who really don't want the process to finish, they want me to be tried and convicted before we have the information presented.
Meanwhile, another accuser accused Latvala's accuser of trying to sabotage careers, while the Senate Majority Leader accused the accuser of the accuser's accuser of being part of a smear campaign to silence other victims. No matter how this one pans out, there will be animosity and embarrassment that could cripple the state Senate, which has already had its share of blunders.
The business of the Senate concluded early today.
Yeah, that's Senator Elizabeth Benequisto, who we busted a couple of years ago for skipping work early while her colleague voted for her, making it look as if she was still there.
I can understand how they may say that it looks sloppy.
Well, this week, Benequisto took down the governor's pick for the Public Service Commission. She revealed that former lawmaker and would-be Commissioner Rich Workman abused her, approached her from behind, pushed his body up against her, she said, and made vulgar and inappropriate gestures and kept doing it after she told him to stop. With that, Workman quit. Meanwhile, in Washington, John Conyers quit in a swirl of sexual harassment accusations. And Congress is reeling from revelations that some other members spent millions of tax dollars to make accusations against them go away. Florida Congressman Ron DeSantis was one of the first to say this has to stop, and a growing number of Republicans and Democrats are trying to make it stop, which brings us to our first guest. Time now to bring in Congressman Ron DeSantis from Washington. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Your plan would wipe out the hush fund for sexual harassment on Capitol Hill. It would also require members who used it to pay us back. Where's the enforcement mechanism? What if they do not? What can we do besides accuse them of being rude?
Well, the first part of the bill is that we are actually going to expose all of the settlements. Now, the victims won't be exposed unless they want to come forward, but any member or staff who is involved in one of these settlements, that will be made public. And so they're going to be required to pay it back, and I think the public will demand that they pay it back. So I'm confident that we'll be able to get that done if we can get it signed into law.
You have been one of the strongest advocates in Congress for moving our embassy and recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Do you have any concerns, though, that that could upend the peace process and trigger yet more violence?
Well, I'm concerned always about some of our Arab allies. I think that it's in their interest to still work with the United States and Israel irrespective of that because they're worried about Iran. In terms of the peace process, though, there's not much of a peace process. I mean, they've been doing this for over 20 years.
Well, the president and prior presidents have also said they would like to see some movement from Israel as well. So why grant this concession without getting something in return?
Israel has put a lot of peace proposals on the table. If you go back 2000, 2008, Those were very, very generous. In fact, if I was in the Israeli Knesset, I probably wouldn't have supported those because I think they were probably too generous. But yet, every step of the way, Arafat and now Abbas, they've rejected those proposals. And I think the reason is their view is not that they want two states living side by side in perpetuity. They've never accepted the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. So that is the underlying problem. So we can sit here and say, oh, Israel has to do X, Y, and Z. The fact of the matter is, I think it's very unreasonable for the U.S. government to be pushing Israel to make concessions while we still, to this day, have Palestinians not only funding terrorism, but they'll name streets after terrorists. The textbooks in Palestinian schools do not even have Israel anywhere on the map. That is a major problem.
Congressman DeSantis, thank you.
Meanwhile, Congress cannot yet agree on how to fund the government. Republicans are pulling together tax cuts that the CBO claims would cost working-class families, and 58 House Democrats supported a plan to consider impeaching President Trump, in a plan that failed but may come back yet again, all while Congress is mired in a sexual harassment scandal. We have a lot of ground to cover with the Congresswoman from Tampa.
Well, Congresswoman Cathy Castor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You and Congressman DeSantis don't agree on much, but you both agree that when your colleagues settle harassment claims against them with tax money, that's a problem. Why doesn't this change now?
It needs to change right now, and I filed a bill last week that would end taxpayer-funded settlements for workplace harassment by members of Congress, including sexual harassment. It is a fundamental change that needs to happen in addition to a lot of the process for filing workplace harassment claims.
Why doesn't that happen now? Here's something where Republicans and Democrats agree. Let's break the gridlock this week. Why can't that happen?
Well, I think my GOP colleagues have been solely focused on tax cuts right now, so everything is left till year end. Hopefully, the Me Too Act and this part to end taxpayer-funded settlements for workplace harassment by members of Congress will find a way to get done ASAP.
With respect to federal taxation, are the people of Hillsborough County overtaxed?
You know, during my time in the Congress representing Tampa Bay area families and businesses, the GOP tax cut bill that will be considered and voted on is the most unfair piece of legislation I have seen. It will raise taxes on hardworking middle-class families and guarantee massive tax cuts for the super rich and corporations. It does all that by adding almost $1 trillion to the national debt. Debt that will have to be paid for by our kids and our grandkids.
You don't like those tax cuts, but would you like to see taxes cut somewhere? Are we overtaxed?
You bet. We are overdue for tax reform and simplification. We should start by helping middle-class families and our small business owners. The Tampa Bay area is a community of small businesses, not the big corporations like Apple and others that get significant tax benefits. A lot of these corporations aren't paying taxes right now, and I don't see anything in this bill that is going to make it more fair.
Right now, there is a movement within the House to impeach President Trump, led by Congressman Gutierrez. Where do you line up on that?
Well, I think it's very important that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, continue his work. We saw another guilty plea by the National Security Advisor under President Trump last week. I think the special counsel needs to be allowed to do his work. At some point, it may become relevant to look at that, but I think the focus really should be on boosting families, education, health care, creating jobs, lifting wages. That doesn't do anything right now to help that effort. I think the focus should be on fighting this unfair tax bill and trying to keep the government funded here at year end.
Congressman Castor, thank you.
Thank you, Craig.
In the second half tonight, we'll dig into the threat of war with North Korea and map out our options with the pros and cons of each. And we have some specific proposals to clean up the mess in Tallahassee and in Washington. But first, as I head back to the wall here, we have some exciting news for our show.
Well, I want to take a moment to congratulate our Money, Power, and Politics team for winning 11 Emmy Awards this year. Our team won 2 Emmys in political reporting for our investigation of state tax credits. That's money intended to help high-crime neighborhoods pouring into luxury resorts. Have you seen any drug deals around here?
No, I've not seen drug deals around here.
Shootings?
Nope, not around here. But
Stabbings?
No. No stabbings.
Meanwhile, our team picked up 2 Emmy Awards in business and consumer reporting for our investigation of contradictions in the state food code. So you have to inject additives into an all-natural product in order to call it all-natural.
Yes.
What am I missing?
You're missing a lot of common sense.
And our team also won an Emmy for our series of programs committed to veterans in crisis that drills into continuing delays and contradictions. The VA says yes.
Right.
But the VA says no.
Right.
They knew all the way back then, they just chose to ignore.
How could they if you yourself ignored it?
Well, that's where somebody should have done their homework.
We also won in reporting for our We the People series, and we won another Emmy for Money, Power, and Politics in the category of journalistic enterprise, which includes Marissa Lynn's work on how random people can look in through your webcams, or how your homeowners association can hire people to follow you around without knowing it.
It's uncomfortable to have strangers filming your loved ones that, you don't know who they are, who's regulating them.
A man in an unmarked vehicle that I've never met before is following me. I'm getting my daughter out of the vehicle. What would someone think?
And we won an Emmy for our editorial and commentary work, which we work into our parody and satire segments like this.
The ban. It's not a travel ban.
This is a ban.
That's not a ban.
This is not a travel ban. This is a temporary pause.
We're going to have a very, very strict ban.
Because when we use words like travel ban, that misrepresents what it is.
We'll continue to call out the double talk in Washington with our doubles here at home. Hasn't they called it a ban?
No, they call it a pause. No, extreme vetting.
No, it's not extreme.
It's not a ban.
Oh, hold on. Now we're contradicting one another. We are. Yeah, we are.
It's not a ban.
And so congratulations tonight to Craig Davison and Marissa Lynn. Also congrats to Sir Bonnie Banerjee, and congrats to Linda Hurtado, who also won for consumer and health coverage. And thanks to our entire team and family here. And you can watch the Emmy-winning segments we just highlighted tonight on our YouTube channel. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe there at the top of the page. You can also catch up on prior shows you may have missed. Now, coming up tonight, plans to reel in money in politics, pass term limits for Congress, and solve the crisis in North Korea. The fall of Al Franken and John Conyers, combined with the Roy Moore drama and the shutdown showdown in Congress, and the controversy over Jerusalem and Trump Jr.'s claim of attorney-client privilege with his dad, though neither are attorneys, and the battle over tax cuts created such a blur of events that it pulled focus from the growing threat of nuclear war.
I think it's increasing every day.
Kim Jong-un has threatened the United States many times, but this week he declared that nuclear war is now inevitable.
It doesn't look good right now. Kim Jong-un is not responding to the kind of pressure that he should respond to.
Kim Jong-un is known as an unstable psychopath who is easily rattled, and President Trump is trying to back him down by making fun of him.
Little rocket man, he is a sick puppy.
Kim Jong-un said he had tamed Trump with fire, and then his government warned nuclear war is not a matter of if, but when. And North Korea does appear to now have missiles that could strike any U.S. city. So what should the president do?
He said he's not going to allow this murderous rogue regime to threaten the United States.
Well, North Korea has already crossed that line, and China is giving it the fuel it needs to attack, which is why the Trump administration is telling China to stop or else.
Today, we call on all nations to cut off all ties with North Korea.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. China will scold North Korea, then just keep feeding it, because China knows North Korea would otherwise collapse, which would drive a flood of refugees into China and reunite Korea into a far more powerful rival in China's own backyard. So we can do nothing and hope they don't nuke us, or try a blockade, a surgical strike, or a full-scale invasion.
And if war comes, make no mistake, the North Korean regime will be utterly destroyed.
Please welcome E.J. Otero, former director of intel operations at CENTCOM, also an expert on North Korea from your time at Pacific Command. Thank you for your time. Let's go through the options. Option 1, don't strike North Korea unless North Korea strikes first. It's all well and good until it perfects a long-range missile that can survive re-entry and annihilate Washington or Tampa, CENTCOM, what have you, then it's too late.
The issue is, if they do have it, and they do have the will to use it,
yes and yes,
what level of response are we going to have?
And that's what I'm asking you.
Is it going to be conventional? Is it going to be nuclear? I don't think it's going to be nuclear. I think our conventional is strong enough that can eliminate any nuclear capability that North Korea has.
The president could order that today. Why hasn't he?
Because there's a lot of machinations going on behind the scenes with China, with South Korea, and Japan.
Do you think he will?
Absolutely. I think he has a capability. I think the president may actually be ready to do it, order its military forces, our Navy, to go ahead and do it. Lord knows we were sending B-1Bs flying all over South Korea today that have the deployment and the delivery capability to take out any kind of nuclear capability that North Korea has. And we're certainly sending a message to North Korea that we can do this. But in a way, what we're waiting for is for China to say, you can do it, we're going to be out of the game, which they haven't. They said, if you go to war with North Korea, we're going to partner with North Korea. Is that just blowing smoke, or is that for real, since they have become a pain to China for a very long time? Or if China going to tell the United States, listen, this is going to be horrendous for everybody in the region. Nobody wins. Let me take care of this, and give me a few months to take care of this. And that's what I think may be happening at this point.
Option 3. A blockade resolve the Cuban Missile Crisis. Could you blockade North Korea and strangle its supply of oil?
No, because what happens with embargoes, as we know, there's always countries around the world that are willing to partner, negotiate, trade with these countries, with the rogue countries. Even if we were to do an embargo against North Korea at this point, they're not going to get what they want, but they're going to get something. So it's not going to work the way we want it to, especially if it is to stop the nuclear program, because they have shown that they don't care what happens to the people. They only want to be a player in the nuclear game in the world.
Colonel E.J. Otero, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Now, as the threat of war heats up, Congress has been caught up in scandal, of course, and mostly missing in action. So each week, we're working through different ideas to fix that and playing devil's advocate with each. So as we trade out the chairs here, our next guest has tonight's big idea. Okay, please welcome Edward R. Murrow Fellow Adam Goodman, political strategist on the mess that is politics in Washington. Part of your prescription, term limits for Congress.
We use the magic number 12. 2 6-year terms for senators, 3 4-year terms for members of Congress, a single 12-year term for members of the Supreme Court. If we do this, I think we will have people that will be more aimed and desiring of doing the right thing and being statesmanship and showing statesmanship rather versus one-upmanship.
But who may also have less knowledge on the inner workings of Washington and deal making. You saw what happened in the legislature. The lobbyists tend to get much more clout than they already have. Who's to say the same thing would not happen here?
This is the biggest argument about term limits. I mean, whether or not in losing institutional memory, we sacrifice something. But given what is going on, or I should say not going on in Washington these days, and the increasing sense of helplessness, I think, Craig, we all feel, I think we need to do something more dramatic. And the nice thing about this, the founding fathers over 200 years ago gave us a pathway to get there.
Part of the problem, though, is that people in Congress don't mix and mingle enough as they did in the Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill days. You would be taking people who aren't mixing enough and mixing in a lot of people who interact even less and know one another even less. Would it not just exacerbate the gridlock we're seeing in Washington?
Well, I'll tell you, we all rue for the days that you just described when people actually were friends in the U.S. Senate and Congress and tried to row together for the purposes of the country. I think, however, in the world of now, fresh blood is always a good idea. Fresh ideas, those who aren't beholden to the system, who aren't owned by the system, but are there to represent truly the interests that brought them there, which is the American people.
Adam Goodman, thank you once more for your time.
Thank you.
Now, coming up, the call to reel in money in politics with author and Professor Darrell Paulson will join us to weigh in. And once again, please welcome Darrell Paulson, Professor Emeritus at the University of South Florida, author and columnist, and now regular on our show. So let's start with how you break the chokehold money has on the elective process.
Well, first you have to decide if money has a chokehold, and probably most Americans would agree with that statement. But there are others, many others, who believe that money is part of the political process and a legitimate part. And the parties have fundamentally always divided on this issue. Democrats have strongly supported public financing of campaigns. They want the public to finance it, and they also want limits on how much candidates for different offices can spend. Republicans have always opposed that, saying the voters should decide, and that money is a form of support for a political candidate. It indicates how much support he has. And if a candidate is no good, he's not going to get any money. If a candidate is good and the people like what he's doing, money gravitates to that particular candidate. And they also don't like the limitations on how much money you can spend, because they think that that puts challengers at a complete disadvantage, that incumbents are better known, they have all sorts of resources available to them. The challenger's at a tremendous disadvantage because he's only got a small pot of money that he can spend to try and oust the incumbent candidate.
In your opinion, should state tax dollars be used to fund these campaigns?
Well, not in my opinion. I've never liked public financing of campaigns. And once again, so many of the reforms that you see these days are attempts to get politics out of politics. And I would just as soon get politics back into politics. I know people are upset with politics. But I think money is a form of political activity. Giving money is a form of political activity. A lot of people don't want to get involved in campaigns, but they can sit down and write a check for a candidate that they support, and I think that's a legitimate political activity.
Darrell Paulson, thanks for joining us. Watch Mobile and Baldwin counties. If Roy Moore underperforms their prediction, Doug Jones will pull an upset and win the race in Alabama. That's our show. See you next week.